Have you ever considered being a trustee? How could that benefit you and what's the commitment required? My guest today, Leon Ward, will tell you all about that. Leon Ward, young, talented, passionate, and fully committed in inspiring real change. I have to admit that when I read your profile, I was so inspired by so many experiences and so many interesting people you've met during your job. You've met the Queen, Prince Harry and Meghan, you've met Theresa May, and above all, you work with dozens of head of governments of the Commonwealth. Like, wow, that's what I call a fascinating journey. So Leon, where did all that start and how?
I just joined my local youth council through my school council, and then from there on in it's been a complete snowball whirlwind effect over the last now 12, 13 years. I started when I was about 14 and I'm now 27. And I think through that local engagement, I then was able to access a whole range of opportunities nationally and internationally.
So what organisation do you work for now and what's your role there?
My day job, if you like, which pays the rent and pays my bills, is I'm the programme manager for Wales for a youth education charity called First Give. But alongside that, I'm deputy chair of Brook Young People, which is a sexual health clinic that some people will know as Brook Advisory Clinics. We run health centres across the country for 16 to 25-year-olds. And then the third thing, I guess, to cover, because of the introduction around the Commonwealth, is last year I was chair of the Commonwealth Youth Council, which is how all those amazing experiences happened with the people that we spoke about earlier.
So what does it mean being a trustee?
Trustees are the guardians of charities, and they are first and foremost volunteers, and they are people who come from all walks of life with all sorts of background and skills to help set the strategic direction of a charity and to, well, clues in the job title really, trustee, to be trusted in running that charity. We are accountable to the Charity Commission, who regulates charities across England and Wales and is kind of the first focal point for charity trustees. But in one sentence, we are just volunteers who help to run charitable organisations.
So what different roles are available for those who would like to be a trustee?
Lots of people have sort of natural interest in the charity sector. So lots of people are interested in health charities or animal charities, or in my case, the youth sector. And there are organisations out there working on all sorts of things. I can guarantee you, whatever issue it is you care about, there is a charity out there for you. And I guess that's the first question that you need to ask if you are thinking about being a trustee, which is there an organisation out there that resonates with what I think, with what I believe in, with the values that I have? And then really, if you've got the time and the energy to volunteer, then think about being a trustee, because trustees are volunteers first and foremost. And our key role really is to set the strategic direction of the charity, to be trusted with public money, because all charities spend public money, irrespective of whether you get that in the form of government grants or through charitable donations from the public. It is public money. And so we are naturally the guardians of that public money. And that is, in one sentence, what I would say a trustee does.
And can you sum up in a few steps what's the best way to become a trustee?
I think that's a really tricky question, because lots of organisations recruit completely differently to others. I would say if you are looking at becoming a trustee, there are a few things you can do that make that journey a little bit easier. I think the first is research the charities that you're interested in. And then I think it's about keeping your eye out for what positions come available, because most boards have quite a natural refresh cycle where trustees serve for 3 years, maybe they do that twice, it's renewable twice. So at Brook, I'm allowed to serve 3 years and that's renewable once. I can serve for a full 6 years, which means the board changes fairly regularly. And then I think... That is
to guarantee some stability in the charity?
Yes, I think so. And it's best practice around making sure that it doesn't become too stable and that you have fresh ideas and fresh people coming in.
And what's the benefit that people can get in being trustees? So why people should think about doing that?
I think there's lots of benefits. I think there are some career-based benefits. When I started university, I just had been involved with the charity for several years as a young advisor, as part of their youth advisory panel, and they were then recruiting for young trustees, and I thought, actually, this is going to be a great way to see a different side to the charity sector. It's going to be a really great way to network with kind of people at the top of their game in whatever it is that they do in their lives. And so I know I'm a better paid member of staff because of my experience on boards. I think it's another way of giving back that isn't financial. It's volunteering in its purest form. And it's a chance for you to continue to provide your skills to a charity that needs you. A couple of years ago, actually, I wrote a best practice guide about young trustees, and in that I included lots of examples of charities that had included young trustees around the board. And those examples are what people celebrate the most about that guide, because it allows them to think, well, that organisation is very similar to us. They've done it, we can probably steal that model or borrow that model and change it and adapt it to make it work for us. So those are the kind of 2 calls to action I would have for anyone that's watching these.
Your guide, indeed, Leon, is so interesting, and I'm sure it's already helping a lot of people understanding more about being a trustee and also encouraging young people becoming trustee. There's something really fascinating about your experience, and that you became a trustee when you were 18. Is that correct?
Yes.
Like, wow.
Yeah.
Normally, as you said, trustee are roles associated with more senior kind of roles. What is the level of experience required to be a trustee?
Oh, I think this is a question I come across quite often. Lots of people question what do young people bring to the board table, and that's a very legitimate question. Now, I would argue that to be a decent trustee, kind of one of the key skills you need is to be able to listen and work as a team with the other trustees. I think a board that operates really constructively and really well is made up of people that can bring other skills too. So people that can bring the very typical ones around finance, legal, etc., but also around digital, around customer engagement, around sales, around safeguarding. In my charity, for instance, where I work, we work with secondary schools, so it would make sense for us to have a trustee who is a head teacher of a secondary school, or even a class teacher in a secondary school, maybe even a parent of the pupils who's experienced and been there and watched their student go through the program that we offer.
And in terms of time commitment, how many hours are usually required a trustee to dedicate to the charity?
I think it's very hard to be able to give you a solid hours number. It completely depends on the size of the charity, the structure of the board, the way that the board works, and of course the operating context of that charity. But I think before you become a trustee, you can ask that question. How much time do you expect me to commit? And I think the answer will reflect a little bit of what I've said, which is it kind of depends what's going on. But I would argue over a year, you're probably not going to spend more than 3 days.
Per month?
So per month, you're 2 to 3 hours a month?
2 to 3 hours per month?
Yeah.
Okay, that's at least a good indication. And what's the recruitment process for becoming a trustee?
An organisation that's doing it properly will come up with a normal role specification, will come up with a person specification, and then ask you to apply to and outline how you meet those. I've seen some organisations do it with video conferencing, where people can submit a 2-minute CV video about them and the experience that they bring and why they want to join the board. Most still do it by paper applications, at which point you get shortlisted, go to interview. Some boards might offer you the chance to shadow a board meeting, to have a look at what the board meeting is like, to get a flavour for the length of time you might have to serve, and how long a meeting might run. Some of them will run sort of open sessions where you can come along, meet the trustees, meet some of the staff, hear about some of the issues the charity's got going on. Every single one is different, but the starter bit in terms of getting a role description together and a person spec and then asking for people to apply is pretty standard practice. It's the second half really where I see more charities innovating and doing things differently.
Would you say that being a trustee could be a good stepping stone for those who want to move from corporate, for example, to the non-profit sector?
I think that's a real good way of bridging your corporate experience to the not-for-profit sector, to get you to understand a little bit how it works and what's going on, and to really just start getting your kind of feet under the table really about what's going on. So yes, it is a good stepping stone, and actually I reflect on my own experience on that, because at Brook we're a sexual health charity, so some of the things we talk about are very sexy, if you like, in terms of issues. So we have men around the table and women around the table talking about period poverty, talking about consent, talking about the Me Too movement. These are quite modern issues that some people might feel totally uncomfortable talking about. I would argue that's the very person you need in the room, because that's the people whose heart and mind you have to change to be able to make sure that young people can access the health services that they need to, and especially around their sexual health and around the relationships that they're having, because it's a very fast changing world out there. So, and I would argue that bringing someone like that into the table will make the discussions a lot richer.
Leon, is there any difference between being a trustee for a small charity or a big charity?
Yes, I think if you're a trustee of a small charity, you're more likely to be quite hands-on. Some charities don't have any paid staff. The trustees are the volunteers, are the two groups of people that do everything. In a larger charity, I think you'll do less of that and will do more of the kind of thinking.
And again, talking about your guide, you also wrote that young trustees gain a number of demonstrable skills that can help boost their employability. Now, do you think that's valid too for people who want to change their career?
Yes, I think unless you have been operating like a trustee in your day job, which I think would be a bit odd unless you're at the very, very top of your career, the sorts of things you do in a board, the zooming out of the detail, the thinking strategically, the challenging the executive, the being the pot where an organisation can litmus test their ideas with you, all of that is going to give you new skills and new experiences, or at least continue to develop the skills you've got even if they're not new. It's a completely different realm for most people to step into the charity sector at board level and be able to impact the work that it's doing.
And what personal characteristics are required to be a great trustee?
Oh, I think it depends on the role, but I would say some of the generic ones are someone that's committed, someone that's enthusiastic, somebody that's not afraid to ask the question and sometimes put their neck out on the line. I think charities deal with such, political issues sometimes. It requires people to be willing to challenge the status quo and be challenged, so somebody that can accept challenge. And I would say somebody that is really keen to make a difference but doesn't quite know how.
Leon, your top tip to nail the application to become a trustee?
I think learn your skill set and summarise it well, but don't be restricted by the person's specification. I think you should articulate in the application and in the interview all the kind of whole package that you're going to bring to the board, rather than just the specific skill set that they're looking for, because I think boards are better when they have a mixture of specialists and generalists around the table.
Wow, Leon, that was captivating. Thank you so much for sharing such a wealth of information about being a trustee.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And you, if you want to apply to become a trustee, check out the roles available on charityjob.co.uk. And if you want more information on how to nail the application and the interview to enter the charity sector, check out the Charity Job blog, where you'll find plenty of useful information. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next 9 to Alive episode.
And just one final comment from me. If you do end up becoming a trustee, please do share your journey with us in the comments at the bottom of the blog.
Thank you so much. Bye.